for the song a bad sitcom, Minority Report. First of all, I wanted to also acknowledge how important John McGinnis has been for me. You know, when you a new professor, and a lot of times you get handed the class that that nobody else wants. So I was the one. I didn't go to school to teach Louisiana politics, but I was assigned to teach that class. My second semester working at Southern University, and so so you search around how to find a text, and so it was John McGinnis's works that are really. I had been following Louisiana politics as a citizen. It's his works that really gave me a great foundation, and so I really just credit him for just his insight, his wit. His books are just page turners. He not only gets the facts right, but he tells it in such a compelling way that you can't put his books down. And it's been an honor in the last couple times just to actually have to do this with him. And so you're right. He has sorely missed. I just want to mention a few things in the time that I have. It's already been mentioned about there was a lot of fanfare in the early part of the session about this whole payday loan issue. I think Representative Ted James made that a central thing that he tried to accomplish. And after all of the hoopla about that, basically nothing really happened, despite the fact that you had actually a lot of ordinary people, coming to the Capitol and explaining the problems that you have with the payday loans. It turns out that these ordinary people were basically no match for the more organized, well-funded lobbyists of the payday loan industry. And actually, this was a sort of a recurring theme on a number of issues at the Capitol this year. We had a number of instances where you had a lot of ordinary folks coming to the Capitol on a number of issues, and for example, Common Core was a very good example of this, and people who were quite upset about things, and for the most part, they weren't successful. For the most part, they simply were no match for the much more well-organized lobbyists, who were able to beat back their efforts. And this was another example of this, where people came to the Capitol with a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and then they left empty-handed. In Louisiana, because of what the legislature has done, abortions are going to be hard to get in Louisiana. The governor is going to sign one of these, another one of these. I guess you can call it one of these cut and paste conservative bills. I call it with the admitting privileges that's going to be required of abortion clinics, which will effectively close probably about 3 clinics. And you can probably expect that there will be a legal challenge to this, but that could tie to who knows what will happen. This actually could end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. But in the meantime, unless the court stays the implementation of this law, the practical effect of this law will be it will close several clinics, because there will be the clinics who simply are not going to meet the standards of this law, and they want to be forced to close. Our lawmakers, despite the fact that the United States Supreme Court in 2003 ruled that that laws that outlaw sodomy are unconstitutional, our legislature refused to repeal a law that the Supreme Court has said a decade ago is clearly not only is unconstitutional but unenforceable. We had a big stink about this about a year ago when I think it was either Baton Rouge Police or East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriffs, were basically arrested, homosexuals in public parks, and then they realized, we can't charge these people because the law won't let us to. Yet, despite the fact, not only was this bill beaten back, it wasn't even close. Because in the Louisiana Family Forum came there and they made several arguments, and that was the end of it. So we still have sodomy laws on the books, despite the fact that they are unconstitutional and unenforceable. Then also, we look at some other issues that are not specifically minority or women's issues, but they would have helped or benefited minorities, like the raise in the minimum wage. Or the expansion of Medicaid. Neither one of these bills passed. Efforts passed. This is not a particular surprise, but actually, what we ended up with, instead of expanding Medicaid, we get this interesting experiment called Bobby Care. That it's really not a plan at all. It's really a set of principles. And at some point, we're going to actually find out what the plan is, and we may even find out what it costs. But let's say it just basically passed it and allows them to develop it. But it's not a plan. It's a plan with blank sheets. And they went home and then passed it. So, we don't know what the budget implications of any of this will be. We don't even know if the federal government will even let us do it. We just passed it. Also, there are some other issues in which I want to mention real quickly that, again, while they ostensibly are not about race, they really are about race in a lot of ways. At least race is a major subtext and also a major part of the foreground of these issues. Efforts to restructure the East Baton Rouge Parish school system once again failed. It passed the Senate. It passed the House Education Committee, and then it was crushed on the House floor. Now, this bill was an example of what actually happens when people actually figure out what's actually in the bill. A major difference between this bill and what happened 2 years ago with the governor's education reform bill was that it was rushed through the process. They bundled a lot of things together, which of course later said was unconstitutional, and a lot of people didn't even read the bill. And then later you had lawmakers complaining about certain things, and then we said, well, but it's in the bill. You voted for it. And you see that on the House floor, as just to be in the debate, the more legislators understood what was actually in the bill, the less votes this thing got. And by the time it was over with, they only got 31 votes. It was a crushing defeat for the chamber, who had invested a lot of energy in this. But that's what happens when people may actually figure out what's in a bill. It's amazing what can happen. Also, there were several efforts to try to derail the St. George Incorporation effort. They basically failed. In fact, this actually ended up being one of the more farcical spectacles at the end of the session. Because there was a bill to try to put a moratorium on incorporation efforts, and then one by one, various parishes asked for exceptions, and it got to the point where it just got ridiculous, and so the whole effort just kind of collapsed and died, and so I think I'm out of time now. So thank you. Turn to the next speaker.
I'm here. Thank you, Albert. And now, at this time, what, John, something's the matter? Okay, can you hear me?
No.
Something's wrong. Albert, what did you do? Okay, thank you. At this time, we'd like to pay tribute to one of our members, John McGinnis. This is the first time in 19 years that he is not with us in person. I know he's here with us in spirit. Each of you, please take our tribute to John home with you. He was a very special friend, a very fair and balanced journalist, and Jeremy, you've got some big shoes to fill. And it is with great admiration that I say thank you to Jeremy Alford, his partner, for being willing to not only step in this time, but hopefully to step in and always have a presence of Louisiana politics at the reality check. Jeremy?
I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you, and let me tell you why. At home, I have a very strong, independent wife who enjoys telling me what to do, and quite frankly, I love her to do it. I have a 7-year-old girl who has an opinion on everything under the sky. I get a blow-by-blow every afternoon of what happened at daycare. I have an 18-month-old son who's just now beginning to talk, more like babbling. Look, this kid says more things about nothing that I'm absolutely certain he is destined to serve in the Louisiana legislature. So when I'm not doing things like this, I'm home with them, and that's all to say thank you for allowing me to speak for more than 5 minutes uninterrupted. What did we learn about the legislature this year? I think once again we were reminded that the legislature is like Novocaine. Takes a little while to kick in, but boy, when it does, you don't know where you're going to wake up, what's going to happen. And that's all to say that the session did not end the way that it started. It started with a bang and it ended with a whimper. And I'm going to give you 3 takeaways, and then I'll tell you what we should look forward to in the next session, and then we'll wrap it up. Number 1, for big oil, it was a yes session. For education, it was a no session. For Governor Jindal, it was a maybe session. Big Oil got everything they wanted except for one initiative. If you ever question how much control they have over the pressure points in the political process, look no further than this session. I think both bills will be signed. This story is not over. The bills that were passed this year will end up in the courts. On education, this was a real big surprise to me. The Speaker of the House seemed like he started to hit all the right points and to make education a priority this session. There were nearly 190 bills assigned to the education committees. That's the most in recent memory. And to see how many of them failed. There was a proposal to kind of scale back TOPS. It's such a popular program, though. Nobody if they can get their kids a free education, they want to do it, so legislators backed away from that. Common Core was a hot issue. It was very emotional. But so much involvement from the parents, I think lawmakers started second guessing. The governor changed his position on the stance. And also it's a very complex topic. A lawmaker told me that this was the most debated topic of the session that no one understood. The third is the governor. For all the complaining and the harping that the media and the legislature did about the governor not being present this year, about presenting the lightest administration agenda we've seen in 2 terms, they really put a lot of trust in this man towards the end of this session. They're allowing him to cut $71 million from the budget. And look, if I was a legislator and the governor came to me and said, hey, instead of you making the tough decisions, just kick it over to us. So lawmakers took a step back. The governor, of course, is out there running for president. He has a national agenda. He has a nonprofit that came up with these very broad strokes for health care. And the legislature, embraced that. It took a Democrat to make it happen, comically enough. And so there's nothing in this plan. What's going to happen is the governor's health leader is going to go and create a plan to bring it back to legislators in September. So looking forward, what's going to happen with oil and gas? The one lawsuit from the coastal parishes of Jefferson and Orleans, they were not able to move. So what we're going to see is probably that issue is going to sit on the shelf until a new governor is elected. However, for the first time, we're going to see the oil lobby go after parish council seats in those 2 parishes and elsewhere. I mean, of course, they have a stronghold over the legislature and even in some of the federal races, but to see them go on the parish level is just going to be really fun to watch. For education, expect to see all those bills again next year. I think there's going to be a new focus on the minimum foundation funding formula. This is the funding for public schools. And as for the governor, the big question is whether he's going to step it up next year or take a step back. But everybody keep your Novocaine handy, because I got a feeling it's going to be a long, bumpy ride. But to cap this off, I want to tell what was John's favorite joke. And John did have a favorite joke, and I know a few of you, and definitely almost everybody up here, has heard that joke before. And I used to pick on John, and he said, I know people have heard it before, but I love telling it. So I'm gonna tell it, and I'm gonna sit down and we'll answer some questions. Mike Foster, Buddy Romer, and Edwin Edwards all end up in heaven on the same day. They go to the pearly gates, and for whatever reason, the gates don't work. So Buddy Romer tells St. Peter, let me go look. I used to be a contractor. I can figure this out. So Romer goes over and he comes back with a big stack of papers. He goes, here's the receipts. Here's explains all the cost and everything. I'll do it for $1,000. We'll get it up and running. But Foster jumps in. He's like, oh, hey, I did some contracting too. So Foster goes and looks and comes back and tells St. Peter, $1,500. We'll take care of it. St. Peter said, why the extra $500? He goes, you pay what you get. You get what you pay for. So by the time Edwards kind of figures out what's going on, and he walks up and goes over to the gate and kind of kicks it a little bit and goes back to St. Peter. Said, I'll take care of that for $3,000. St. Peter said, $3,000? That's 3 times what Romer said. That's twice what Foster. Edwards leans in and says, 1,000 for you, 1,000 for me, and we sub it out to Romer.
And now you know why we're all going to miss John so very, very much. First, I'd like to invite Robert Scott to come back up, and because it's such an important topic, and discuss what he didn't have time to while he was here on campaign finance. It's a topic, an issue that is very dear to Leaders with Vision. Please, Robert, enlighten us.
Well, thanks, Gene. There's been a lot of media attention on how office holders spend their campaign finance money, and a lot about donations. I know the Times-Picayune NOLA has done a lot of work on it. We've seen some from Jeremy's outfit. The Advocate has really gotten into the game. I don't know how many have been watching all the lurid, wonderful stories coming out of St. Tammany, but we've just had some really entertaining stuff coming out of there. And I think what happened is this session, there was an interest on the part of the legislature in at least taking a look at this and looking at maybe what they could do. Now, as far as anything happening on the donation side, nothing really happened in terms of controlling anything on the donation side or creating more disclosures on the donation side. At least if there were, it was fairly minor. But what you saw was some attention on the expenditure side. And the reason the expenditure side is important is because even though this is private money being given to someone who's running a campaign or someone who's an office holder, if you then take that money and enrich yourself, you are essentially using that campaign donation as a bribe. So we want to try to control that. And I think most legislators are aware of this, and actually I think most legislators probably are doing the right thing. But the law doesn't apply just to them. It applies to all office holders and all campaigners in the state, on the state and local level. So what they ended up discussing was a bill by Representative Tim Burns, and it makes a very modest step on campaign expenditure reporting. It basically says that you have to give a description of the purpose of the campaign expenditure. Now, there's already a spot on the campaign finance form for that, and you could even argue that the ethics board, if it wanted to, could already enforce it to that level and ask for a better description. And it would have been better if the law in the end had said you need to provide a description of how the expenditure relates to the holding of office or running a campaign, but the language in the end just said how the expenditure relates to basically how the expenditure relates to the expenditure, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. However, I will say that this bill, in combination with another bill that was passed, I think will give one notch a little bit better on disclosure. I think it sends a signal out to people who are running for office and in office that they are going to be called upon to put a description of what their expenditure is, and hopefully it'll get some actual attention. The other law that was passed basically says that up to now, if the ethics staff had a question about your campaign finance form, they had to You had to launch a formal investigation to then go and have some interaction with the candidate to find out what was going on. Now this law will allow some of that conversation to take place to help clarify things. So I think a combination, this isn't much. This is a teeny tiny little baby step, and maybe it'll serve as a little bit of a deterrent to some politicians who might want to make some expenditures that they really shouldn't. But it does not change the standards of what you can spend money on and what you can't spend money on. And meanwhile, the Board of Ethics is going to be, we've urged the Board of Ethics to try to produce a list, much the way the Federal Elections Commission and other state jurisdictions do on this, and to try to tell candidates, here's an adequate explanation and here's an inadequate explanation. If you turn in something that says campaign signs, then everybody knows what that is, and that's probably a campaign expenditure. If you turn in something that just says gift, and that's probably not going to do it. We're probably going to need to know a little bit more than that. So amidst all this great media attention and all this great focus on this issue, we have this teeny little bill that maybe will help a little bit. Meanwhile, I would just tell you, if you think campaign finance issues have been an interesting subject up to now, wait till 2015. We are going to see a whole new level of money talking in the state elections. We've got the governor's race, we have all the legislative races, and we're going to see campaigns, we're going to see outside money, we're going to see PAC money. It is going to be the most aggressive campaign finance efforts that you've ever seen. And not all directly to the candidates, but also to the PACs, where we don't have the same kind of disclosure. Not a whole lot's been done, but we certainly are going to be able to give the media more and more chances to do some really great work on this issue.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who have questions, please fill out your cards and raise your hand. John will come pick them up, and we'll start with the first question. Did the legislature provide any remedies for the federal rejection of Louisiana hospital privatization plan? And the follow-up question is, does the legislature have any oversight over this hospital privatization plan? And it's been suggested that this question go to Robert Scott.
I shouldn't go again. Why don't you let somebody else go?
No.
Okay.
Butcher kicked it strictly into your lap.
Okay, the hospital privatization. I think what you had here was a privatization move. PAR did a fairly significant report on this that came out in December. I recommend it to you. I think it's a very balanced look at what has happened. On the positive side, with the hospital privatizations, what we've seen is that we've gotten LSU out of the business of operating hospitals statewide and focusing on this mission of education in the medical field, and that's a good step forward. We've also seen, I think, some results already from some of these areas where we're seeing better health care and a little bit above the type of health care they were getting in terms of a little bit of preventative care that a lot of these people under the old system were not getting. So I think the healthcare standard, and that's important. We tend to look at this hospital privatization strictly as a budget issue and a finance issue, but it's a healthcare issue. And if they're getting better healthcare, that's a positive. Where we have concerns about the privatization mainly is, number one, the long-term finances for this are really in doubt. And the uncompensated care we know is going to be reduced nationwide. We're probably going to take a hit on that. That's a major underpinning. If you looked at the latest letter from CMS to the state, they're raising a lot of questions about the upper payment limit, which has been the form of rescue funds for the state budget for health care for years now. Genius program started by Senator Heitmeyer. But the question is how are they going to let that continue to inflate and become such a big factor as it has become in our state healthcare budget. All these things help underpin the healthcare system, and the privatization system in the long run is probably got to find some other way to be funded. It probably can't continue under the same pattern that it has now. That's our main concern about it. And if you talk to people in the hospital industry, they will probably all tell you confidentially that that is the case too. They're very concerned about it. And so that's why they have these constitutional amendments coming up in the fall that's going to try to help them out. They wouldn't want me to call it a bed fee, but there's a way that they're going to be able to charge a fee that can get a federal match, and they want to put that in the Constitution. So that's coming up. So the other problem with the privatizations is that each market is very different, and you're going to have to evaluate the privatizations according to each market, because every deal is rather unique. But in some of these communities, you have a partner hospital that is taking over the charity hospital role, and they have a completely different financial model supporting them than the non-partner hospital. The non-partner hospital isn't getting the same rate of reimbursement, and so you're creating some financial strain on the non-partner hospital. So I think in the long run, and a lot of legislators started catching on to this session and started vocalizing about it. I think we're going to see probably in the long run some changes in this whole privatization effort. We think, as a privatization, it's been a net plus, but I don't see it as sustainable in the long run. Some changes are going to have to be made. We don't know yet how much the federal government will ask to reconcile with the state. A lot of the attention so far has been placed on concerns about the advance payments that were made by the hospitals and whether or not these measured up to what the federal agency thought were appropriate donations that could be matched with the federal money. And so I think what we're looking at is not just the advance payments. That's certainly concerned about that. It's still not completely clear to us that the overall payment system is not still in some question. And like I said, the upper payment limit system, which is sort of separate from that, but is a major healthcare funding, is also they're raising questions about it. I think there's just a lot of big question marks out there. Now they're going to be able to delay, the administration is going to be able to delay the reckoning on this for a good long while. But at this moment, I think that really to answer the question, we don't know how much it's going to be, and we don't know when the bill is going to come due, but there will be something.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? Well, this one goes to the House and the Senate. How did the Office of Group Benefits go from a $500,000 surplus to a deficit once Bobby sold it to a private company?